Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. We have people joining from all over the world. Welcome to Interchange 23, the annual Global Commonwealth Online Conference in its third year. And I'm very happy to have everyone join us today. That this year's theme is about clean ocean energy and air, and today's session is a panel discussion that will be covering clean oceans. I hope you've enjoyed the conference so far, and you've been able to join the other sessions throughout the week. My name is Mace Montaza, and I am Program Manager for the Commonwealth Alumni Network at British Council, working with the British Council. And as I had mentioned, today's session is going to be about clean oceans. It's a roundtable discussion, and there will be an opportunity at the end to ask some questions. I would like to introduce our chair and our panelists. Our chair is Andrew Chadwick, who is a global lead for Alumni at British Council. And our panelists are Dr. Akanksha Gupta, who is a PhD candidate, Geophysical Fluid Dynamics, Dundee and Kanpur from India. Mr. Hashan, Kokuhennadige, PhD candidate, National Oceanography, Center, Southampton, University of Southampton, and lecturer, Department of Oceanography and Marine Geology, University of Ruhuna from Sri Lanka. We also have Associate Professor Roshan Ramessur, University of Mauritius, and co-chair OA Africa from Mauritius. I believe that we will have Associate Professor Roshan will be joining us a bit later. Before we start the session, I was hoping for us to get an idea of your thoughts on the topic. A poll will pop up on your screen. There are only 3 questions, and it's just multiple answer questions. You just select. So if I can ask you to spend half a minute on each question, the next question will pop up on the screen once we have answers from everyone. So if you could just select. Thank you so much. I can see answers coming in. Thank you. And this is the second question. And the third question.
Okay, go to webinar. Okay, now I can see.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So you can put comments in the chat. If you cannot hear us, please let me know. Before we start the session, if I may, there are just some housekeeping rules. So this is a webinar. This is a recorded session. and we will post the recording on some social media channels. You can add your questions in the chat. Do not raise your hands because we won't be able to turn on your microphone as this is a webinar, but do please add your comments or questions in the chat throughout the session. British Council colleagues are monitoring the chat. And at the end, there will be an opportunity for our panelists to go through your questions and comments and open discussion about the topic. I also want to ask you to be mindful and respectful of others' opinions. And there's closed captioning for this session. There's a link here. If you click on the closed captioning, or if you want the closed captioning to appear on the screen, you just click on the three dots more closed and select caption, and the captioning will appear on the screen. So without any more discussions or any more comments, if you can hear us, and if there are any other questions, please, as I said, add them to the chat. I would like to ask our chair to introduce himself more and ask the panelists to introduce themselves and start the session. I hope you enjoy the session.
Thank you very much, Mace, for that welcome, for kicking us off on the session today. We're looking forward to a really nice discussion and a detailed discussion around the subject of clean oceans. We have three Commonwealth Scholar alumni who are expert in the field to share with us today. I hope we have three, because I know one of our panel members has been having difficulties connecting. So just at the moment we have two, Dr. Gupta and give me 1 second, and Dr. Kokuhennadige. And forgive me if pronunciation isn't right. You'll be able to correct the pronunciation as you introduce yourselves. So we'll start off and just by asking the panel members to briefly introduce yourselves, to say what your area of specialism is, how you came into the Commonwealth Scholarship alumni community, and what you're doing now. And then after that round of introductions, we'll kick off into some questions. Dr. Gupta, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Andrew, for the introduction. My name is Akanksha Gupta. So recently I did my PhD. I was a Commonwealth Split Site Fellow at the university. There I was working with Dr. Anirban Guha on mitigation of plastic pollutants, and during my stay we have also submitted one paper to the Journal of Fluid Mechanics, which is a top tier journal in my field, which is fluid mechanics. And as I was saying that I just completed my PhD, and right now I'm in a transition period. From the next month, I will start my postdoctoral position at the University of California, San Diego. There also I will work on the air-sea interaction and its application on weather forecasting and marine pollution. So overall, my main focus is on the ocean and air pollution, and also clean energy harvesting. And then and one more thing, that my research area is broadly comes under the geophysical fluid dynamics. So it mainly focuses on the interaction of water waves with the other physical processes which happens in the ocean. And so the primary focus of my work, as I was telling, it's on the mitigation pollution and also on the harvesting energy from the water waves. So yeah, this is my brief introduction. So yeah, thank you. Andrew. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thanks for explaining that. Dr. Kokuhennadige, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Andrew. Good morning, everyone. I'm yet to receive my doctorate. I'm about to submit my thesis, so I'm still not doctor, but hope I'll get my doctorate soon. So thank you very much for inviting me for this talk on clean oceans. Let me say something about myself. So I started my bachelor degree in Sri Lanka from University of Ruhuna, where I did my first degree in marine and fisheries sciences. Then I moved to Belgium for my master's degree. So I hold my master's degree from University of Brussels. And so that's inspired me to do more on higher studies. And at the same time, I wanted to have a job. Then I returned back to Sri Lanka, and then I joined my local university as a lecturer. So I'm currently working as a lecturer. At the same time, I'm doing my PhD in the University of Southampton. And so then I applied my Commonwealth Scholarship in 2018, and then I was succeeded. And then I got this opportunity continue my PhD on marine carbon cycle. So my project is looking on marine carbon cycle in different part of oceans and how anthropogenic carbon dioxide, anthropogenic carbon means like human-made carbon dioxide, how it affects a marine carbon cycle by looking at carbon isotopes. So there are studies looking at the concentration. So in my approach is different. So I'm looking carbon isotopes to see or understand more on carbon cycle. So that's my current research. And I have been involved in a couple of other international researchers. For example, Atlantic Meridional Transect cruise. I've been involved with one of the cruise in 2017. For that, I received a scholarship to join that cruise from POGO scholarship. And then I traveled from Southampton to Antarctica, all the way through the mid-Atlantic Ocean, and then researching about oceans. So those are some of my involvements in ocean science and the expeditions. And I keep working on oceans, and I hope I'll returning home and then work on region ocean sciences.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much for explaining that. And I'm delighted that we have with us Dr. Ramessur. You've managed to been able to join us for the panel. So thank you very much and welcome to us. We're just doing our introductions, so you've arrived in perfect time on cue to introduce yourself and your background in the study of the oceans and interest in the oceans, and also if you could just say a word about where you were a Commonwealth Scholar.
Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry for this delay. I had some technical problems here. Yep. I'm very delighted to be part of this panel for the Clean Oceans for Interchange 23. I'm actually an associate professor at the University of Mauritius in Ocean Sciences and the co-chair of Ocean Acidification Africa for the region here, representing East Africa Steering Committee. I was a Commonwealth Scholar in 1985. Studying at the School of Ocean Sciences at Bangor University in North Wales. I did a joint honours in marine biology and chemistry, and that was for 3 years. And afterwards, I was also a Chevening Scholar, same at the School of Ocean Sciences, doing marine environmental protection. And eventually, I joined the university and I got scholarships and so on. And I also did a PhD with Imperial College at Silwood Park with Professor Suzanne Parry. Working on trace elements using ICP-MS. Well, anyway, that's my background, and at the moment, I'm leading a project under the IOC UNESCO YMSA funding for on ocean acidification in the Western Indian Ocean as the principal investigator, and I've been publishing a number of papers and actually supervising some PhD students, postgraduate students, working in the region. I mean, probably this should be a very brief introduction of what I'm doing at the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that introduction and altogether for those introductions. We're obviously in very good hands for the discussion today that will kick off about oceans. A great deal of expertise and long-term experience in the subject. So we'll start off with our round of sort of questions to get the conversation going. The first question that we have is the following. Countries have signed up to achieving a net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And in the respect of oceans, is this possible? And what are the challenges? And I wonder if we can start, Dr. Ramessur, with you for your comments on that question.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting question indeed, because at the moment, what we can find is we set the target net zero towards 2050, but at the moment in certain countries, if I take the case of the UK, for example, they are trying to achieve that probably net zero or near zero towards 2040, but in certain countries, even Mauritius, we are having targets like reduction in our towards an increase in renewable energy 60% towards 2030. But obviously, what I can find is that following COP26 and COP27, even that there has been countries submitting indices which are nationally determined contributions. I mean, there are still delays in achieving this target, and especially countries like China and India. There may be, there may be delays a few decades further, 2050, probably 2070, that they could achieve this target. Well, the challenge is it all depends on the type of innovation, the type of the reduction in the use of fossil fuels. Probably they're trying to achieve like 20 or 30% in most countries with the use of new renewable energy like solar and wind power, and especially for the oceans. We're still undergoing certain transition. I've been trying to develop certain prototypes in harnessing the energy from the oceans using probably the tidal or wave or any kind of power in these offshore winds. But well, again, this is the challenge that is put forward 2050 for most countries, but there are certain countries we are already net zero, but these are countries like Madagascar where there hasn't been any use of fossil fuels, probably more trees and so on. But I don't know. It all depends on how fast we can achieve this. What type of innovation we can accelerate, and how we're going to decrease the use of fossil fuels, especially using hybrid cars or industries or infrastructure. And that would be my point for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I wonder, Dr. Gupta, would you like to come in on this question about
sure.
the possibility?
Yeah, it's a very nice question, and it's like a very hot topic. These days, people are talking about net zero emission, and we recently COP26 and COP27, they have discussed mainly the main agenda was climate change on the net zero emission. As Dr. Roshan has mentioned that all the countries are not targeting, like their aim is not 2050, as he mentioned, that India aims to achieve net zero by 2070. And there are some other countries also which are at this moment, which are like Bhutan. They are saying Bhutan is like a negative carbon emission country. So, and the thing is that, is this possible in the respect of ocean? Is this possible? So what are the main contributors? First, if we want to discuss about that, how we can achieve net zero with respect to ocean and other things, first we have to understand how these things are polluting, and how this greenhouse effect, or how this greenhouse gases are mainly contributing in oceans. So in India, mainly it's like in India and some more low-income countries, what is happening that near the rivers. So as you know, if oceans are polluted, so mainly if our rivers are polluted, then the water from rivers are going to the ocean. So if we want to clean our ocean, or if we want to go achieve net zero in the respect of ocean, also first we need to clean our oceans, and there should be there should be of carbon to our rivers, which is going from the question was that, is this possible and what are the challenges? So net zero for ocean, in my point of view, it is difficult. First, we have to achieve net zero for atmosphere. Then I think if we will be able to achieve net zero emission in the respect of atmosphere by 2050 or 2070, that will be like a great achievement for all over for us. Then I think the ocean will be the next target, because ocean is more like a sink which is absorbing all the carbon, and still at this moment there is a lot of carbon dioxide present in the ocean, and I think in the near future there will be a saturation point, and when we will reach the saturation point, this ocean acidification will come in the picture. I think Dr. Ramessur he is the expert in this field, he will discuss more about this topic. So I think, and also the plastic pollution. Plastic pollution is also a major factor in this ocean pollution and all those things, which is also a major contributor where we also have to focus how we can mitigate these plastic pollutants from the rivers first and then the ocean. So yeah, these are the challenges, and we will see that is it.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that. And this is a question that I'd like to ask, just which perhaps everybody listening and on the panel, you probably all know, maybe it's a dumb question, but you mentioned that the oceans need to be clean in order to be able to capture carbon. Can you just explain why is that? Why do they need to be clean to fulfill that function?
Yeah, so for this thing, as I was mentioning about plastic pollution. So if we have any marine pollutants, that those marine pollutants will go towards the shoreline or towards the river bank where we have a soil, and also to the area where irrigation or where the plantation will take place. So if these plastic pollutants, or like a micro plastic, like a very tiny particle of plastic will go to the soil, it will when this particle will go to the soil, then it will take part in this carbon emission. There is a very technological terms which I do not which I can't recall right now. But I do know this thing: when this plastic will go to the soil, it will take part in a carbon emission.
Thank you. Well, thank you. That's helpful to understand that. And now then, Hashan, would you like to come in and on this question?
Yeah, I would like to add something. So it's possible, and the targets are possible, but it's totally depend on the technological advancement. I would say what kind of strategies that we have to think about reducing carbon, and it depends on the investment that you can afford. For example, marine industry, shipping industry, they have introduced a couple of new initiatives to reduce carbon. So initially, as you know, like the shipping industry mainly fueled by steam, then it comes to heavy fuel, and now International Maritime Organization, they have directed the shipping companies and the ship designers to use hybrid kind of fuel sources. So the most of new ships, they target to produce develop with electrical powered as well as fuel powered, and also some of the ships now, they have a scrubber system which absorb impurities from the burning fossil fuel, and that reduce couple of bad emitters. and the sulfur content should be very low in the fuel that they have to use. And some ships, they now designed with a lot of hull developments and propeller developments. That in that way they reduce the emissions, the fuel they consume, and then where they reduce the emissions. So those are the couple of things the shipping industry has already initiated. And so it's mainly depend on the strategies. It's possible, but it takes time, because what we have emitted has been already absorbed by oceans. So since industrialization, 50% of, nearly half of the anthropogenic carbon, or the human-made carbon dioxide, has been absorbed by oceans. So in every year, 2 gigatons of carbon has been absorbed into the upper ocean. And for example, during the last decade, 2010 to 2019, nearly 10 gigatons of carbon has been emitted through anthropogenic sources, for example, fossil fuels and cement production. And half of that remained in atmosphere, and the rest of the thing has been absorbed by ocean and land vegetations. You can see like the percentage, like 46% has been stored in atmosphere, and the 23% absorbed to the ocean, and nearly 31% absorbed to the land vegetation. So we have to think about it like what we have already emitted has been absorbed in the ocean, and the effect will continue in coming centuries. So even if we stop emissions now, the effect will remain there, and it keep affecting our oceans and the biodiversity. So it's a good thing to start now, and then you can work on it. So if we delay that approach, so then the accumulation is high, and the effect will be continuing.
So a strong message for rapid action. And I'm conscious of what you were saying in the comments together, if you like, the varied factors and the importance of, I suppose, regulation and agreements in the ocean to make sure that everybody is signing up to the same standards and having an agreements, which sort of takes us to the follow-up question that I wanted to ask you, which is really about these international agreements. Knowing that COP26 in the UK was very proud to host that in Glasgow, and Commonwealth alumni contributed quite a bit to that program. And of course, more recently, we've had COP27 in Egypt. Do you think these have been successful events? Do you think they're moving in the right direction for international agreement? What's your feeling about how successful they are, and where we stand in terms of international agreements for clean oceans? Akanksha, can I come to you first for that? If Dr. Gupta, if I can come to you first for that.
Sorry, I heard Hashan, so I thought you were asking to Hashan. Okay, sorry. Yeah, so as you were saying, in my point of view, I think COP26, it's a good initiative. So there are two things. If you don't do anything and you do something, and that will motivate people, and that will it's more like a motivation. Or if you discuss about some problem, then you can find the solution, and then you can end up to resolve those issues. So COP26 is more like this, that it is a platform where all the countries will come up, and they can discuss what is required and how they can resolve the issues. And as in respect of ocean, what I think that it is overall we have a one ocean. By water, all of us are connected. So it is an international issue if we really want to clean our ocean. And as Hashan was saying, that we have to start working on it now. So COP26 and COP27 and these kind of initiative and these kind of platform is a place where you can mainly find the solution, or mainly not the solution or the direction where we have to approach. As people were saying that by 2050, there will be more fish, there will be more plastic bottles in the ocean as compared to the fish. So these just, so in my point of view, the question which you were asking, that these are the good platform where we can discuss things and find the solution. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much. And Dr. Ramessur, would you like to come into this question about the the international agreements and the progress made in the various COP summits?
Yeah, thank you. As far as I know about it, that Commonwealth alumni have been involved in a number of projects recently, like the climate hackathon, which took place during the period during COP26 or COP27, trying to build awareness, working on some projects, working in teams in different regional teams. And actually, there were some kind of awards which were given on this. I mean, I myself, I was involved as a member of OA Africa to produce a brief which was submitted to the virtual ocean pavilion during COP26 and COP27, and where we were involved in trying to talk about ocean acidification and so on. Obviously, I agree that COP26 and COP27, there's always been discussions about reduction of carbon emissions, but still to reach this target of 1.5, this is the red line, not to cross of 1.5 degrees centigrade. Well, there's a lot to be achieved, and I mean, these are, I mean, they still COP26 and COP27, special COP27 was concluded that there has been a lot of homework which still has to be done, and very little time to achieve that, because we are at the brink of a burning planet, and we really have to act very fast, and it all depends on how fast we're going to act. Because coming back to the clean oceans, as Hansha said, I mean, there's talking about shipping green corridors, or we're talking about carbon content or the biogeochemistry of the oceans, and how to achieve the ocean as a sink for carbon, especially using certain plants like mangroves or seagrass as blue carbon, and these are all things that has to be worked together. So obviously, I agree that capacity building within the Commonwealth, especially with Commonwealth alumni or Commonwealth scholars working on certain projects, these are things which are happening at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hashan, would you like to comment on this particular point? You're very welcome to.
Yeah, I think these kind of platforms are very essential. I mean, COP26, and I mean, because in the Paris Agreement, the outcome was to initiate national directions of contributions, national determined contributions. So it's the heart of Paris Agreement, and that so countries are agreed to make their contributions to reduce and limit the carbon emissions, and it also supported to the Kyoto Protocol, which emphasized the limitations of and limits and minimizing of greenhouse gas emissions. So these kind of platforms are very essential. I think it helps to assess the country-wise the plans in every 5 years. I think that you can assess your dedications or your contribution to minimize your emissions. So that helps you to understand your status and your goals, and then you can revise and retune your targets. And it's a good platform to understand your status as well as your neighboring country status. In that triggers or that encourage you to work on it. I think it's very important. And then and it also helps to it makes a platform, for example, developing countries. So those who don't have much economy, so the economy wise, stable countries can help developing countries by, for example, there's a strategy called debt for nature. So there are some countries who have money or the economical stable, they can support developing nations to protect our nature by funding and supporting funds to plantations, and then compensate. That's kind of a compensate, but they have emitting at the moment. So it's a good initiative to understand the possibilities and to protect our nature.
That's great. Thank you very much. And we'll take. There's been a question in the chat, sort of relevant to this overall subject about, I suppose, the challenges globally facing the oceans, from Happy Sharia, who really asked a question about the research gaps, the massive research gaps on controlling issues relating to pollution in the oceans. I just throw it out there in case any of you have any sort of feelings of where you think the main research gaps are at the moment.
Okay, can I just take this on? The thing is, we at the moment 2021, 2030 is the United Nations Ocean Decade for Sustainable Development, and there's a number of actions which are being taken around the world, identifying projects or actions on the oceans and on climate change nexus. These are the two, linking the ocean with the climate. So much research gaps coming in, like I bring on this topic of ocean acidification, which is the evil twin of climate change, where you have an increase of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which are probably at the moment exceeding 400 parts per million. And we see that there increasingly has been a decrease in the pH of seawater by 0.1, where it was 8.2, it becomes 8.1. But on a log scale, it means like 30% increase in carbon dioxide concentration. So, of course, I mean, coming back to the plastics and so on, this is another problem, the microplastics. But ocean acidification obviously is a hidden risk which we don't see, and especially it's changing the carbonate chemistry of the oceans in terms of coral reefs or shellfish reefs, where you have more pressure or stress which are being on the marine organisms, especially we have most countries which are even in temperate climate or tropical areas, temperate climates where the pH has gone to 7.8, probably because of the increase of carbon dioxide in polar waters, increasing because of dissolution of the gases. So obviously there's a number of research gaps here, obviously, to try to understand scenarios or simulation of carbon dioxide, what effect that would have probably in 50 years time or 100 years time. Especially at the moment, we're talking of the decline of coral reefs, 20% around the world. Most the marine biodiversity, 25% of the marine biodiversity are found in the tropical regions. And obviously the shellfish reefs, which is an important source of food, like lobster or the oyster, Pacific Oceans, and so on. This has had a very impact and decline on these. So we are trying to understand this carbonate chemistry and trying to understand how fast we can monitor these changes, and especially in African or Asian countries. These are topics which are quite new, and this research has been done quite have existed probably 30 years back in Western countries, in European countries, in American countries, in North America. But now we are trying to take conscience, trying to understand this phenomenon. And obviously, this is an expensive research. And especially we have to use sensors, pH sensors, trying to understand open cell titration. And this is in Africa, for example, I'm part of this steering committee where we're discussing with countries around Africa, coastal regions, in places like West Africa or North Africa, where there's a lack of capacity building, trying to understand the workshops, trying to give more equipment. These are things that are required. even in terms of microplastic, because microplastic is a problem where there hasn't been any kind of international agreement and what type of plastic we're talking about, what type of the standards are we talking about, and especially whether it's offshore or land-based, and what's happening with the seafood. These are all actual problems, and obviously ocean is a very is 70% of the planet. The major gaps, obviously, oceanography is quite an important aspect, marine science, which is underfunded, very underfunded type of project. And this is where we need to have more stakeholders, and especially the coastal community, which are more vulnerable in terms of climate change, like flooding, heat waves, disasters. And they said that there's a need to have $100 billion each year climate financing to developing countries. And we are talking about like increasing 90% electricity generation by 2050 from new renewables. Obviously, all linked together, and we're already seeing the impact of climate change. And obviously, this needs to be funded. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much. Well, that's a really comprehensive list of significant challenges and where the research gaps are, and the challenge that you highlight there as well, of course, of the funding and the inequalities, I suppose, of where the funding and the research has taken place up until now, in some parts of the world and not in others. I think that's a great way of setting out the scene to that question about the research gaps. Akanksha, Dr. Gupta, Hashan, if you'd like to come in, please do, but we can move the conversation on.
Yeah, I do have one comment. Sorry, just a minute. Yeah. So on the plastic pollution, I have working on plastic pollution in ocean and other kinds of pollutions which we have in our ocean and rivers, like oil spills and sediments and all other kinds of pollutants. So it's more, it also depends on the size of the pollutants. In ocean and rivers, we have the pollutants can be from macro, like a big plastic bottles or bigger than that. And also a tiny particles, as Dr. Ramessur was saying, microplastics. So people are working on these things. So for having, there are few countries, and also in India, there are recently they are working on like a on the surface trash barriers. So more like a sieving techniques people are using to collect all the macro particles or a big plastic bottles from the ocean. So what they are mainly doing near the river mouths, they are having barriers. So they have a barriers, and after some time they will go there and collect all the pollutants from that. Or also there are some companies which are working on collecting this plastic waste from the Pacific garbage, Pacific Ocean. We have a big garbage in the Pacific Ocean where and also in my PhD work, I have also worked on where we can also use some non-invasive techniques to mitigate these pollutants. It's more, so these non-invasive techniques are more like if you can implement, or you can implement artificial bottom topography, or if you can just improvise the existing river bed or ocean floor, so that ocean floor can navigate, or it's more like a steer all the pollutants to a predefined location from where you can collect these particles. So these are the works are also going on to mitigate this plastic pollution and other kind of pollutants from the river and ocean.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks. Hashan, do you want to comment briefly on the sort of the research gaps?
As Dr. Roshan said, like, so in this decade of ocean science, so every country has a responsibility to achieve these protection goals by providing sufficient amount of, doing sufficient amount of research. To do that, so these countries need sufficient amount of data from marine science on marine related environments. So say, for example, Indian Ocean is the least research area. So I think compared to the other ocean, so the nearby countries around, I mean, regional countries should have do more research. To do that, they need some funding. So the funding is the main obstacle to do research. Going to the sea, it's very costly. I think Roshan will agree with me. So and not only that, to operate a cruise, but also you can deploy sensors, as Roshan said, like to deploy buoys that records ocean-related measurements. It's very useful to continue monitoring your ocean, and that will save your time and money compared to the cruise. So so in that way, the countries can have an idea about the ocean environment, and then they can think about the strategies, and then they can revise their plans to protect the ocean. I think the data is more important, and it is very expensive. So I think the research gaps can be only filled if there's any sufficient amount of funding, and plus the trained staff. And in the Commonwealth Scholarship can provide if more fundings, if they can provide more fundings to trained individuals, so they can go back to their country and then they can start working on their oceans. So I think in that way, they can address this research gap in untouched area like Indian Ocean.
Thank you very much. That was a very clear call from all of you for more research, more funding. You highlight how expensive it is as well, which perhaps, you know, to somebody like me from the outside is not immediately obvious. You know, when you stop to think about the actually the complexities of researching the oceans, it must be expensive. You made that very clear in your comments. So the research funding, as you've said, is really clear. Let's move to a different question now, which to ask you, which is about really the issues of biodiversity and resource management. And what are the issues when you're considering biodiversity and resource management for clean oceans? What are the issues there? Hashan, would you like to start off answering that one?
Yeah. So I'll start with carbon emissions. So as we earlier mentioned, carbon has been emitted since industrialization. That the emission is exponentially increased during the last few decades. Say, for example, in 60 to 69 decade, it was like 1.8, somewhere around 1.8 gigatons of carbon has been emitted to the atmosphere, and that rate has been increased to the last decades. So the last decade, it was like 10.9 gigatons of carbon. So you can see the difference, like it has been increased 5 times within 5 decades. So what we have emitted now has been absorbed to the ocean. So then ocean acidification takes place once carbon dioxide dissolves in the ocean, and it totally alters the carbon chemistry. So that when you have more carbon dioxide in ocean, so that increases the acidity of the ocean. So due to the since industrialization, so the ocean acidification has been increased 30%, and it decreases the pH like 0.1. So the 30% increase of acidity is like as Roshan said, it's like a hidden thing you won't see unless you analyzed. So that acidity will dissolve the calcium carbonate from corals, and the calcareous shell forming organisms will shrink in their size. So that directly affects the fisheries of the particular area. So that ultimately affects the economy of the coastal communities and the countries. So that's one of the impact from ocean acidification. Apart from that, ocean has been impacted by a lot of industries, for example, maritime industry, associated impacts like oil pollution, and then oil pollution from ships and oil pollution from oil rigs, and also from marine dredging environments has provide a lot of marine debris to the ocean. So that lowers, when there are more debris on the ocean, that lowers the clarity. So when you don't have much clarity, that reduces the productivity of the ocean. So sun will not penetrate enough, and the production of phytoplankton will be lower. So then affects the entire area and the biodiversity. And apart from that, the marine plastic pollution is very important, and we don't know the impact. How will it be impact in the future? Say, for example, this 5 millimeter. So marine microplastics are classified as the plastic less than 5 millimeter or 5 millimeter. So it's very tiny in size, but if the load is high, the impact, the surface area of this 5 millimeter is, you can't imagine. So this surface of 5 millimeter size microplastic can serve as a substrate for bacteria and other pathogens. So then it can go down the biological chain, and it will come magnified in numbers in higher trophic levels. So it's very, very dangerous when it comes to like consumption of fish in the coming times. Like it come a lot of pathogens and harmful bacteria, and also like chemical compounds, like very harmful organic chemical compounds can come in that way. And so there are a lot of impacts. And also, if I tell something about fisheries, there's an illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. That's very, very critical. So that devastated the fisheries resources, because we don't know, it should be regulated and it should be monitored well. Otherwise, you will catch the small size fish rather than the fish big enough to catch. So that reduce your fisheries resources for coming years, so that you will survive today, but there will be a lot of effect in the future. And also there are some fishing called like dynamite fishing. So there are some bottom trawling. So there are some regions in the world it's still happening, but it's very illegal, and it should be monitored and it should be banned. There are some what do you call law enforcements to completely ban these bottom trawling. Say, for example, Sri Lanka has banned bottom trawling. So bottom trawling, you know, like it drags a trawl on the floor, and that devastated all the entire sea flow, and so you can't. So it will take time to replenish the environment, to regrow, and the fishery stop. So it's a one in a way that like you can have like a lot of fish in one go, but it will you will have a long lag for future fish stock replenishment.
Yeah, no, thank you. And it's interesting to, you know, as you talk about all these effects, of course, so many of them are very long term. I suppose it's very difficult for us. We're simulating, I presume, and imagining what's going on. It's difficult to know really what the long term effects will be, but we're talking playing out over decades, I imagine, before we know the full extent. Yeah. Dr. Ramessur, would you like to comment onto this question about you know, the biodiversity issues and resource management? Is there anything you'd like to add or supplement to what Hashan has said?
Yeah, obviously. Well, as been mentioned, I mean, we are actually suffering from a loss and a decline in marine biodiversity, and what we find is that our priority at the moment is to have a clean, healthy, productive ocean, and obviously, with the decrease in biodiversity, with all the pollutants and all the ocean acidification aspects, there is a need to be able to protect all these species in terms of blue carbon and so on? How do you increase that? And obviously there are research gaps or research data gaps in the major oceans, and collecting this data and sharing, and for various countries there must be some kind of global platform where people can access and this data for important decision making. Especially we're talking about digital twins, where integrate data and simulations and trying to understand how the ocean is going to be affected by certain aspects. I mean, these are all modeling scenarios and trying to understand predictions. I mean, trying to predict, and this is a big challenge. How do you predict? I mean, you can predict the weather. There are certain things that you can predict in physical, in meteorology, but for the oceans, in terms of currents, in terms of marine biodiversity, can we actually do that? We haven't have reached this level, and still globally talking. I mean, there are some countries who are able to access to have data which has been collected, but still there are big research gaps. So obviously under the United Nations, I mean, there are some biodiversity framework which are talking about trying to adopt or certain nature-based solutions to combat a climate crisis. I mean, climate change. I mean, all these are quite big challenges that needs to be looked into. I mean, especially very countries, and we are suffering for extinction of species with increase of carbon dioxide in the oceans. We're having aragonite or saturation states which are being exceeded, shallow species or deep species. I mean, these are becoming, I mean, the carbon dioxide from the deep oceans moving up and increasing, I mean, the ocean is becoming more acidic. There are changes in the physical oceanography in terms of currents moving around, the Gulf Stream changing weather patterns and all these things. Obviously, resource management will have to take into consideration all these aspects, especially in terms of coastal ocean management, where people, there's a large number of people, population living on the coastal area. So a very big challenge in terms, and we've seen flooding recently in Pakistan, for example, flooding everywhere. Obviously, these are natural. These are climate change impacts. Obviously, superposed by earthquakes. I mean, this is a tectonic feature. It's not to do with climate change, but these are disasters which are happening everywhere. I mean, changes in the planetary conditions. So obviously, all has to be taken into consideration. Well, a loss of biodiversity, decline in biodiversity, obviously will have an impact on the coastal livelihood in terms of food, seafood, and so on. And with an increasing in population, we're talking about a food crisis as well. So that would be my thing.
Yeah,
thank you.
That's interesting. I'll come the same question, Akanksha, Dr. Gupta, to you in a minute. But I was just curious to hear you speak, Dr. Roshan. You know, whether there are, and as a panel, you've talked about the issue of technology and technological changes. Are there sort of technological or solutions which will help to kind of reverse some of this? When I listen to it, so you sometimes hear we're thinking, well, we've got to reduce, we've got to stop, we've got to change, got to regulate. But are there some solutions, for instance, I don't know, for instance, to coral, the acidification problem of degradation of coral, where it's possible to reverse that by manufacturing or artificial solutions which would help to change that, for instance?
Well, what I can see is that at the moment, to reach this reduction of 100 of carbon dioxide emissions, I mean, there are still prototypes which are being produced. These are things which are being tested at the moment. We haven't reached this level, and we are talking about nature-based solutions. We are trying to investigate further how things like protecting mangroves or protecting seagrass beds, these are doing capturing carbon. I mean, carbon capture, carbon storage, or decarbonization pathways. All these have to be invented. I mean, electric generation, new type of engines, and so on. I mean, use of fuels like ammonia for the shipping industry. I mean, this is a new challenge. I mean, we've been dependent on the fossil fuels for quite some time. And now things are changing since the Paris Agreement from 2015. We already reached, we are down the lane towards 2030, talking about countries reaching like 50 or 60, even Mauritius, we are still like 20% renewable energy. I don't think that we can achieve the 60% in 2050 or 100 years time. We're talking about the 1.5 degrees centigrade target. And obviously there are scenarios which have been developed for 2 degrees centigrade or 3 degrees centigrade. We are already, the planet is on fire anyway. We are in a crisis, existential crisis, and the next generation will have to develop this. And this is what we'll have to keep thinking about. This is quite an important challenge for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Dr. Gupta, would you like to come in on the question of the biodiversity challenges?
Yeah, as Hassan and Mr. Hassan and Dr. Ramessur had discussed a lot about ocean acidity, acidification and marine pollution. So in my point of view also, I think the major issue which we are facing right now for to clean our oceans mainly is that CO2 is acidifying our waters, which is mainly covered by Hassan and Professor Ramessur. And the second thing is the marine pollution. So, as it is estimated that there are at least 5 trillion plastic pieces in the ocean, and their weight is around, which is exceeding 250,000 tons. So when this marine element digests these plastic pollutants, so these toxic compounds will migrate up into in our food chain, and also can pose a serious threat to our are small in size, but this can be digested by marine like fish and other marine ecosystem, marine animals, and it's when it will major issue, but still the threat of microparticles is not. We haven't find any effect of microplastic on human health, but there is that people are saying that might be that microplastic, if microplastic will accumulate in your body, it will block your veins or it will clot your blood also. So these are the upgoing research. So and study which says that around 1% of rivers is mainly contributing to the 80% of global marine plastic pollution. So you can see that 1% of rivers, like 1% is approximately 1,000 rivers all over the world is contributing 80% plastic pollution in the ocean. So that the challenge we have is to target rivers and clean these rivers, so we can target, we can focus this issue, which is the plastic pollution and other kind of pollution. And these pollution will also cost the global economy around 6 to 19 billions, which is not including the effect of human health. As Hashan was saying, it is affecting fisheries, tourism, and aquaculture. So yeah, so these are the major issues which we are facing to clean our oceans.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. And I'll turn to the chat. There's been an interesting question in the chat, very specific about emissions and about the focus on carbon dioxide as opposed to methane. So the comment in the chat is that methane is said to be 6 times more harmful than carbon dioxide. And so why is carbon dioxide the only gas considered for mitigation with less attention to methane? I don't know if anyone would like to address that, or if you want to take issue with the statement or response to it.
I can say something on that.
Yeah.
So carbon dioxide is, I think the residence time of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is higher than the methane. So methane only lasts about like 10 years, I think. And in the a decade-long residence time for methane, but compared to that, carbon dioxide can, their residence time is high in the atmosphere, and the abundance of carbon dioxide is higher than methane. So the impact is higher from carbon dioxide compared to methane, but it doesn't mean that like we don't have to think about methane impacts. So yeah.
And do the oceans absorb methane in the same way that they absorb carbon dioxide?
I think, yes, I think Professor Roshan can say something on that as well.
I would say that both are responsible or are termed greenhouse gases. I mean, especially both are, there's two things. It's the climate change, the ocean acidification. We're also talking of the global warming. So all are contributing in a way. It's the heat, it's the acid, the pH, and the next one will be the oxygen content. If we're not very careful, these are the three stresses in the marine environment: temperature, pH, and oxygen. When you have an anoxic condition, which is a decline in oxygen content, they will cause a decrease in biodiversity. And we are all suffering towards that. Increase of global warming at the time, probably a few decades before, we're talking about global warming. Increasing carbon dioxide, I mean, infrared, I mean, all this kind of global warming, increasing temperature. And this will have an impact, obviously. I mean, dissolution of carbon dioxide in the oceans is more, I mean, this has been monitored more closely. But obviously, all these have an impact, and these are termed greenhouse gases. I mean, they're obviously you're talking about methane, and there are seepages of methane in certain countries, certain areas on the ocean floor. I mean, where you have various features, tectonic features, and so on, volcanic eruptions, and so on. Even contribution towards in the farming industry. So all these are responsible, obviously. Yeah, reduction of all this. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would add something on resource management before I forget it. So like, like global warming is happening. And so as a result, there are some states like Pacific Island states have a problem with sea level rising. So because of that reason, so their sovereignty rights has been severely impacted. Like so the sovereign rights determined from the baseline of their coastlines as a baseline, considering their coastline as the baseline. So when the sea level rise has been happening, so they lose their land. So that means their sovereignty right has been severely shrinked. And because of that, there will be a lot of disputes between the neighboring countries, conflicts between the other countries, like what do you call claiming their land, and that ultimately involved with resource management. So, and also because of that issue, so the marginalized people and the coastal communities will have a lot of issues, and they will lose their livelihood opportunities. And there are a couple of issues around these marginalized communities because of this resource. I mean, the loss of resources in marine environments. Yeah.
It's incredible as you explain that the knock-on effects and the cumulative effects of sort of the long-term and I suppose the complicated causation and how that sort of impacts into how everybody lives and the space that we occupy, and the potential, as you're saying, the potential for serious conflict which can result from that. Dr. Gupta, I think you lost your connection. You disappeared from our screens for a couple of minutes, and nice to see you back. I think you might be struggling with a difficult connection because the line isn't always crystal clear for us. But if you'd like to just comment on the question for that we were talking about with relating to the sort of the issues around other impacts, then please do. Otherwise, we can move on to another question.
Yeah, we can move, I think. Yeah, I missed something, so I think it's good to move. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I've got you lined up anyway to approach to first for this next question, so it's it's all coming around. The next question is about national and international management solutions. So what's been identified in this space, and how do we overcome the key challenges arising from decarbonisation of industry and protecting our oceans? So, Dr. Gupta, are you able to sort of comment on this question about the national and international management solutions?
Yeah, so I would like to address the first question, which is what are the national and international management solution have been identified. So mainly for cleaning our oceans. So if I talk about at the national level in India, so there is a project which is called Namami Gange project. It is mainly focusing on India's largest river, which is Ganga, and its tributary. They are focusing to clean Ganga and other rivers. So the other river is Yamuna, which is also a very polluted river in India. So I'm mainly focusing on rivers, because if you clean river, as I was talking, if you clean river, your oceans are also clean at some extent. So in India also, they are mainly focusing on to clean our rivers, which are going through most of major cities in India. So what they are doing at the national level, they are mainly treating sewage water, because the sewage water is the major thing which is polluting our rivers. So there are some plants near the river area, near the rivers, where first they treat sewage water, and then this sewage water, which is comparatively less pollute, then it will go to the open rivers. And then also near the in India, if you go to like a very holistic cities like Haridwar and Rishikesh, where people dump lots of flowers and candles and all those things in the rivers as for their as holistic reasons. So what government is doing, they are having floating trash barriers near this location, so they can capture all these pollutants beforehand, before they can go inside the river, or they can, after some time, they will also sediments also sink in at the river bed. So these are the things, and also these are the things at the national level is going on. And in the similar fashion at the international level, there is one organization called Ocean Cleanup, which are working on cleaning oceans and rivers as well. So for that, they are using barriers, as I was discussing earlier, and also they have barriers and other kind of so what they do, their one boat will go to the rivers or ocean, and for ocean, the big ship is going there, and they are collecting garbage from there. So these are the solution, these are the things are going at the international level to target plastic pollution and other kind of marine pollutant, which will be harmful for marine ecosystem. Yeah, so
thank you. And I imagine it must be very there must be a great challenge with rivers as they cross international boundaries, to make sure that the national agreements are binding. It may be easier in the case of rivers which run through one national territory, but how is it managed with these cross-border?
Yeah, so for cross borders, I think I do not know much about these things, but as I know that they are targeting few cities or few countries, and they are just capturing all. So before going to any country, you have to have an agreement with that country, that we have to like agreement, and funds also, they have to collect funds from that country, and their overall project, which is overall government which is funding this project. So yeah, so there will be a initial agreement between the country and the organization that they have to go to that country and clean those their rivers. So as I was telling that 1% rivers are more pollutant, and these rivers are mainly at the part of South Asia, like the Indonesia, Philippines. So this ocean cleanup organization recently they have recently intercept the name they are giving to this machine is interceptor. That they are sending this interceptor to these Philippines and Indonesia, their cities, Jakarta, and all those places to clean these rivers initially. So I think they do have an agreement with these countries to how to proceed further.
Lovely, thank you. Hashan, do you want to comment on this question about the national and international management solutions?
Yeah, so my point of this like, so before initiating the international law, national level solutions, the law has to be enforced. Then only we can think about solutions. Like, say for example, UK is the first country in the world to pass a law on net zero carbon emission in 2019, I think, if I'm correct. And so that's a good trigger for companies and other stakeholders to put their efforts and then revise their solutions to achieve this goal. And say, for example, in Sri Lanka, so we have a climate change act, but I think it's outdated. We have to think about it to revise it. It's a very good thing. If we revise them, then we can know, we have idea on the current situation, and then we can think about the solutions. And based on these issues, so Sri Lanka has identified some of areas. So our main electrical supplies mainly run from fuel as well as hydropower. So now the country is planning for solar powered energy. So they are targeting on to install solar panels in particular areas like barren lands, as well as floating platforms to harness solar energy, which is not used in frequently. And also think about the transportation. So that they are trying to run all these transports, public transport, by electrical power. And so those are some of the solutions. And also, as Akanksha said, like our rivers has been very polluted, and I think it's happening all around the world. So what you can see from the beaches are not from oceans. It comes all the way from rivers. So you have to target from the source point. I have seen a lot of beach cleanups around the world and around even in Sri Lanka. So my point is, like, we can clean our beaches every day. You can see a lot of litters around the beaches every day, and you can keep cleaning your beaches. But you have to address the source point. Source point is in the terrestrial land, and it comes all the way from the rivers. If you enforce your laws to reduce the litter to rivers, or the industries, banning industries, putting pressure on the industry to reduce your emissions or polluted, then you can reduce pollutants to the offshore. So in that way, you can enforce your law in national level, and international level is must critically addressed. And then you can think about solutions. So solutions there are a lot of solutions, and there are some promising solutions. For example, hybrid power shipping ships. So we haven't seen this kind of innovations previous decades. So it's a good thing to sail with electrical power, and then using wind energy. So while you're sailing, you can use a sail to power your ship that reduce your fuel emission from fossil fuel. and you can use the wind. And also there are some ships I've heard like they use bubbling curtain beneath the hull, so that lowers the resistance from the sea. So that increases the running efficiency. So that lowers your fuel consumption. So there are some technological developments happening around the shipping industry. So I think it's those are some of the solutions that has been taken place.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's very interesting to hear those opportunities, I suppose, and for solutions which would have to be applied, across the board. I suppose they're no good applying them in bits and pieces. Dr. Ramessur, would you like to say anything on this question about the national and international management solutions?
Okay, so I think most of countries have signed the United Nations. I mean, they are meeting the SDG goals. I mean, these are very important goals which have been set up by the United Nations. And obviously, there are still a number of issues that needs to be discussed, like ocean acidification or microplastics, and especially taking it at the country level needs to be. It's more to go towards regional or global. It has to trickle down. And how do you do that? I mean, probably I've been working on ocean acidification myself, trying to develop some kind of white papers in various countries, trying to collaborate with different regions, having a common target, and especially presenting those white papers to certain conventions like the UNEP conventions. I mean, for example, in Africa, we have the Nairobi Convention, we have the Abidjan Convention for West Africa, or Nairobi Convention in East Africa, or then the Barcelona Convention. I mean, all these have to be changed. We're talking about science to policy dialogues, and there are gaps which have to be addressed, and these have not been taken into account in certain documents, in certain legal documents or environmental laws have to be changed. And obviously, we are talking about accessing climate funds. I mean, countries, we're talking about $100 billion a year, but how do you access these climate funds? And how are the institutions like the banks or the financial institutions changing their business models to increase, to enhance this the innovation capacity? I mean, to fund some of these major projects, and all these have to be looked into. And well, obviously, through all these conventions and all these business models and so on, I guess these are very important challenges. I mean, even here in Mauritius, we have had the UK Mauritius partnership just signed Texas climate funding. We've got like 12 million pounds sterling, something just signed recently. But these are other obviously bilateral partnerships which have to be taken into consideration. Of regional partnerships, international partnerships, and all these are very important. Not just looking into, because these are aspects which we need to have a new way of thought about this, and the number of people involved in that, these are things that have to be trained as well, how to use this function. These are new challenges. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Well, listen, this sort of we'd like to take some opportunity in the time that we have to open up for a few more questions from all the participants who are joining the session. I can see that we've got a good few number of people who've been following through with us and following this interesting discussion. So do please take the invitation to post any more questions in the chat. It can be related to the topics that we've been looking at in the discussion, or it can be something different if you've got an issue or a question or a comment that you'd like to make, particularly if you're joining this and you're working, or you have a research or a work interest in the subject of oceans. It'd be very good to hear from you, and to know what where your focus is in that area. So do please take the opportunity to put some more questions in. We'll give it a little bit of time, maybe to hope that some questions will come through. And Mace, I can see you've appeared on the screen, and you'll help to kind of, will you moderate the questions or direct us to the questions? So we'll wait to see what comes through there on the chat. While we're waiting for that, maybe I can just, ask the one sort of provocative question, which is impossible, the question that's impossible to answer. Given that you've said, all of you, that that of course, the issues are multiple and they interact one on the other. If you had to focus on one key issue that, the sort that you've mentioned, whether it's plastics or acidification or river pollution or cleaning up fossil fuels in shipping, or is it possible to to look at it and say, actually, if there was one key priority to help clean up the oceans, you would you choose one? Is it possible to choose one particular area? Dr. Ramessur, I'll come to you first of all with that.
Yeah, okay. Two of the most important, I can't say just one, but this is the issue of the microplastics and the ocean acidification. I mean, ocean acidification is the evolution of climate change. And obviously, it's the decrease of pH is going to affect the biodiversity of the oceans. And when you're affecting the biodiversity of the oceans, we're going to change a number of the biogeochemistry even of the planet. And obviously, they will have an impact on the weather, climate systems, talking about weather, flooding, disasters, heat waves. All these are all linked with oceans, 70% of the atmosphere. So if you're not protecting the reefs, you're not protecting the mangroves, we're talking about coastal erosion, you're talking about an increase in intensity of the rainfall, cyclones, water flooding, certain areas, crisis of water, which is bringing conflicts. I mean, these are all related to climate change. I mean, this is a very very important issue. And in terms of microplastics, we're talking about we're having seafood. I mean, the fish, it's all ingesting microplastics. You get the whales, the seals, and all these things affecting the food chain. And all these are, unbelievable things happening due to the fourth industrialization. And I think things have gone too far. And there's a link. There's a link to that.
Mm.
I mean, we can't just talk about just one component of this, and it has to be integrated in such a way. I mean, river pollution. I mean, from upstream, downstream to the estuaries, affecting everything. We're talking about ocean acidification. We're talking about coastal acidification and increase of freshwater runoff. We're talking about. I mean, all these are linked. Flooding is rivers. I mean, increase in certain places. In Mauritius, we have 1 week flooding. People are just like can't do anything. I mean, it's all the drainage system, and suddenly there was a drought, and suddenly we have water. How do you capture this water? I mean, I think it's a global thing. I mean, we have it has to be linked together. I can't just say that's just one component. It's all.
Yeah, I thought you might come with a response like that, but it's always worth. I'll ask Dr. Gupta, if do you dare focus on one thing? Dr. Gupta, is there anything you would add to that?
Yeah, that's true that it's difficult to focus on one problem because all things are related. If you really want to work on the climate change, you have to, it's like a targeting something from all the directions. So, but if I really need to select one, so as a fluid mechanician, I would choose mitigation of marine pollution first, because if I'm a bit biased on this direction, because this is my PhD topic also. So right now I'm working on this thing. So I will use my expertise on this in this area and try to focus on mitigation of marine pollution as a fluid mechanician. And as a human being, there's one more topic which I'm really interested in, is the waste management. Because for all the pollution thing, how this pollution is going, how all this pollution is ending up in the rivers, because of the waste management system is not appropriate. So as a human being also, I want to work on the waste management system also, which is also a part of climate change, you can say.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks. Thanks for being bold and nailing your colors to one particular mast to a degree. Hashan, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, as I can't say particular issue, as Dr. Roshan said, like all are interconnected. So the ocean, atmosphere, geosphere, biosphere are all interconnected, and the cycling is happening. And say, for example, carbon is cycled through all the components of the Earth. So you can't. The issue is cycling, and because of that, because of these anthropogenic emissions or human-made emissions, so the productive areas in the world can be unproductive in the future, because I don't know, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. I had a little bit of disturbance on the line, but it's clear for me now.
All right. So what I told was like, everything is interconnected, and because of that, the productive sea areas in the world can be turning to unproductive in the future, because of ocean acidification, because of oxygen depletion particularly. So there are some couple of areas like upwelling areas well known for productive areas in terms of fisheries, in terms of biodiversity, in terms of biological production. So because of increased addition of anthropogenic carbon from terrestrial outputs, with the time, these productive areas can be turned into unproductive, as it pushes a lot of remineralized carbon to the surface of these oceanic regions. So that's drove us the biodiversity, and also reduce the fisheries production. So I can't say like the particular issue. So the all are interconnected, and all issues are like very connected.
Okay, thank you. Well, thanks for that. Well, I'll make another call and encouragement for questions in the chat. I can't see any that have come through, and so there must be. We've got there we go. Mace, I can see you're putting one in. I don't know if it's your question or if you've picked that up from somebody else, but and you flashed up the results from the poll before. Do you want to take over and ask the question? And have you got some results from the poll that we ran at the beginning to share?
Yes, absolutely. Well, this question came up at a discussion, an offline discussion, because borders and oceans, country borders and oceans, have been a cause of responsibilities, government responsibilities, taking responsibilities, and the fact of supply chain management, and that will impact shipping. It's been making it more challenging. So at other panel discussions talking about clean air or clean energy, I can feel this is slightly a different discussion when it comes to clean ocean. So I wanted to hear the panelists, because this was a discussion that came up a few times as offline chats. What do you think? Has this been resolved in the last 10 years, or have there been any improvements to this specific challenge? Because clean oceans comes at a different risk because of country borders and oceans, because of supply chain management, because of shipping and transportation. So just interested to hear the panel's opinion on this.
Yes. Well, you can view the oceans in a number of ways. I mean, clean ocean is just one way to look at it. We can talk about looking at the oceans to do modeling or climate or so. I mean, clean oceans, we're talking about pollutants, whether it's anthropogenic or natural. And obviously, with the increase in the number of chemicals we are using in terms of eutrophication, in terms of gases and so on, it's quite, I mean, we can work towards solutions to decrease, because there are standards, marine standards, water quality, and whether we're talking about bacterial contamination or any kind of trace metals, so we're talking about organic waste or industrial effluents. Now you have the anthropogenic aspects. All these are all related. Obviously, you mentioned about the wastewater treatment plants. How can things be achieved to decrease the amount of pollutants or micropollutants or so on? I mean, talking about clean oceans, obviously that there will be a need to check the water quality, to see to it that standards are met, and this is where we have to protect certain areas in terms of marine protection areas and so on. So obviously this is a way to look at it. Clean oceans, how do you stop, oil spills, organic waste, industrial effluents. Obviously there's a need for technology there as well. And this is a way, clean ocean is just one part of the big picture of looking at the ocean in various ways. And obviously if we're going to focus on that, it's mostly we're talking about microplastics, contaminants, and all these kind of things. I don't know how other panelists will view that, but this will be what I think about it. The ocean modeling, predictions, and so on. And obviously there's a need for research on these as well. Using technology to clean, filter, even in terms of plastics, microplastics, and so on. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I was also going to share the results from one of the polls, which was about having the most, what do participants think is the most damaging effect on our oceans? And interestingly enough, it came back as plastic waste. Although I've been reading that offshore drilling and ocean acidification has been a big cause in the recent years. So I'm just going to share the results, and I'd like to, I don't know if you can see the results. I'd like to maybe get the panelists' opinion on this. Do you feel in the recent decade there have been a change in the shift? However, individual perception continues to be plastic waste to be the most damaging effect on oceans. And I don't know if you've come across any research or in your own work in terms of numbers, percentages, or any increases that might be interesting to share here with the group on offshore drilling and ocean acidification.
Yeah, it's very interesting. As I mentioned to you, ocean acidification is the hidden risk ocean, and people don't see it. It's not visible. You don't see it, but it's happening. Whereas the other ones are visible. Plastics, microplastics on the beach, in the seafood and everything, everyone is talking about that. And drilling, of course, the removing fossil fuels in certain places. Obviously there will be oil seepage everywhere. There's a need to combat that. In certain countries, many countries are still using fossil fuels. So, this is a perception, but as I mentioned to you, three important things which are happening is the temperature of the planet, which is increasing. It's the pH of the seawater, which is changing. And the next one will be the pH, the oxygen content. So all will have an impact on the oceans. Oil is one component, oil seepage, plastics as well. This has to be phased out. The use of single-use plastic, or how do you make countries? There are certain frameworks where they have to get rid and use other type of material instead of using plastic, which have a long life. These are people who are working in plastics. It's a big issue as well. Yeah. Thank you. It's a perception. It's more visible. Plastic is more visible. You can see that.
Yeah, true. Because plastic is more visible. That's why people can understand it easily that plastic or this plastic pollution is a threat. But acidification, ocean acidification is also a major threat, but it's like a more complicated word. So it is not very understandable, or it is not very like a word of mouth. So that's why I think we got more votes for plastic pollution as compared to ocean acidification.
I think that's why like oil, the ship companies and the oil rig, the companies that runs the oil rigs, they have implemented a lot of protocols and frameworks to minimize the oil seepage and oil pollution, because it's very noticeable. Like once the leakages happen, and it's noticeable, so they can be easily targeted from other countries or the the international bodies. Okay, there's a seepage, so it's very noticeable. So, but as we discussed, like CO2 in the atmosphere is unnoticed and you can't see, and the effect is very chronic. But it's not like happening right at the moment. It takes time, and the ocean absorbs a lot of carbon, and the impact will remain future in years and years, centuries, many centuries. So even if we stop the emission today, so we have to think about the carbon emissions really critically and address in the future.
Thank you so much. And it would be very interesting to look at probably perhaps offline numbers, because as you're saying, plastic waste is visible, others, although the media would immediately pick up on any oil spills, and we've had some very interesting stories in the last decade about that. But it would be nice to at some point find out percentage of the impacts on clean oceans from these three separate. But thank you so much for answering, and I believe we're done with the questions. I'll hand over to Andrew.
All right, thanks. Well, I think that's it for the. I mean, we're coming close to. We haven't got very much time left anyway for our session. I thought I might just close by asking you guys a question about a subject that's interesting to me is these marine parks and marine protection zones, and whether you've seen that. Are we seeing good results from those? Are they? Do you see those as being a positive step towards sort of keeping the oceans clean, or are they small scale sort of interesting experiments, but not with a larger application? Because I think a number of countries or a number of areas have sort of been set up now in the oceans to try to keep things clean. You'll know far more about this. But do you have any insights or is there any data which sort of backs up the value of these marine protection areas?
Yeah, I can say one example in Sri Lanka. So marine protected area close to Hikkaduwa. So before this has been initiated, so people used to break corals and take them into land and build their walls and build their houses with the live corals. So the government and the responsible authorities have identified the issue. The issue was like the people have depend on limestone mining. So the sources of the limestone was the corals. So they break these corals. They didn't have idea about this importance of corals, and that was the issue. And they didn't know that these corals were the breeding ground for the coastal fisheries. And then they break down, and then they, as a livelihood opportunity, they made limestones, the calcium carbonates for other purposes. So then the government and the responsible authorities have identified the issue, and they educate the people first, and then they provide the alternative livelihoods, and that was some of the mitigation measures that has been taken place in implementing that marine protected area, and that particular area has been now declared as a sanctuary. So now people know the value of that particular coral reef, but it's too late to for now. It takes time to replenish the coral bed, and so people have been keep educating. They should keep educating. Otherwise, there will be disaster in future. If they don't understand, and the people, and for example, tourists, and it was very attracted by tourists, and they step on these corals, and they know that the importance of these very fragile animals are lives in these corals, and they step on, and then once you step on the corals, it will kill thousands of coral polyps, and then it will take years to regrow, and then everyone has to be educated, and those who have depend on coral reef should be supplied by other alternative opportunities. And then that was a good solution, results from that particular area.
Oh, that's great. Well, that's good to hear that. And we'll probably wrap up there unless anyone else wants to come in on the on that particular question. But it's been good to hear the that comment.
Yeah, so in India, it's like around 31 marine protected area. These are mainly the national parks which are near the coastline. So it's good to protect these areas because if I tell you from my personal experience, once I visited one coastal line area near the Dundee city when I was in the UK. So there was seagulls, seals. So there were lots of seals near the North Sea. So they were just resting near the coastline, and I heard in the news that lots of lots of people were going there, and they were just going very close to the seals, and because they do not know how seals will react and how they will feel when there is any human being, or we are creatures for them. They do not know who we are. So they were just running towards the ocean, and I think some seals were died because of these things. They were just running towards the ocean, and I also see this thing by my eyes also. So it's good to have this marine protected area to at least protect these marine ecosystem, to give them a home, or there are separate home where they can live according to their wish, I think.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Ramessur, do you want to comment very briefly?
Yeah. I guess most countries have to increase the marine protected areas by 30% in the coming years. But it's a good way to there are certain measures and restrictions which have to be adopted in these areas to probably for the fisheries industry, for the imported marine ecosystem, the coral reefs, for regeneration of these ecosystems as well. So these are measures that have to be taken to reduce a decline in some species or extinction of certain species. So it's very important to be able to manage this, and it's a tool actually, and the coastal ocean management to understand that, and especially biodiversity. They have implications for food supplies, livelihoods, and biodiversity as well. So many people depend on this, and if it all goes extinct, obviously this will be a dead zone, and obviously very important issues that have to be taken. Yeah,
interesting. So definitely an initiative and an intervention to watch and to see how those areas can help to kind of provide, I suppose, laboratories and evidence of sort of cleaning up oceans. Well, listen, thank you all very much. It takes us to the end of the session. I really appreciated your time. It's been a really rich and deep conversation, I think, about we've touched on a whole number of the areas and got a real sense of the complexity of the subject, of the complexity, if you like, of the interconnecting ecosystems, and also the risks involved in how the negative results from oceans which are polluted will impact not only just sort of our food supplies and fisheries in the ocean themselves, but have a bigger impact onto the land that we all occupy, onto human livelihoods, potential human conflict, and much more unstable natural disasters, much more unstable climate systems. So you really kind of, through the discussion, I think really brought home the complexity and the seriousness of the subject, and how it absolutely deserves to be brought forward and considered, and the call at one stage, from all of you to for greater funding and research. A lot of areas of research still to be looked at, a lot of room and areas for deeper research, and making the point that it's a complex and expensive area of research that needs to be properly invested in. I think that's come across really clearly in the discussion. It's been really good that we've been able to have, as we've gone through the discussion, we've been able to touch on some of the questions that have come through, and have kept the conversation moving. So thank you to those of you who have been joining us and participating all the way through and listening in. Thank you. I hope you've appreciated it and enjoyed the conversation. Some others, of course, may join when we submit the recording of this and make it much more widely available to Commonwealth Scholarship alumni. We hope they'll find interest there. So thank you for taking the time to follow us and follow the discussion. And to the three panelists, thank you so much for your time today. Mace, I wonder, are you going to wrap up with some final words? I don't want to steal your thunder, as they say. I'll let you wrap up.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for chairing the session, and thank you to our panelists for joining and the participants. I hope you've enjoyed the week that we've had with Interchange. Following this is the closing session. Please feel free to join the closing session. After this, we will be just mentioning a few numbers of attendance throughout the week. It's been really a pleasure listening to the panelists and to your discussions on the chat. Thank you very much for the effort you've put into this, and please do listen to if you like, you can always watch the recordings on the Commonwealth Scholarship Commission YouTube channel. And I hope you have a lovely weekend to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.